What's up, dudes and girls? Today we're gonna be talking about your ass. That's right, the gluteal muscles. And I have a special guest with me today, my girlfriend, because we're gonna be going over the anatomy, the function, and certain exercises that can really help pinpoint and target your ass muscles to make sure they're getting stronger, they're developing, and they're looking damn good. We're also gonna be talking about one thing not a lot of other people like to talk about. So let's get started. So now it's time to go over the anatomy and the function of the gluteal muscles. But first, Michaela, you're gonna have to take off your pants. So that way we can get a really good look at the anatomy.
What?
Yes.
All right.
And as you can tell through advanced technology, we're able to simulate what it would look like if Michaela had no skin on her lower body. So that way we can really take a good look at the anatomy and the gluteal muscles. So we're gonna be going over not only the anatomy, but also some of the positions that the muscles start and end on, which is called the origin and insertion. The first muscle we're gonna be talking about is going to be the gluteus maximus. Now, as you can tell, it's the biggest muscle in the gluteal muscles, but it's also the biggest muscle in your body as well. Now, this is going to give your butt its shape and also its power. Now, the origin point is going to be connecting here on the ilium, but also a bit down on the sacrum, and a little bit on the coccyx as well. And it's going to be inserting the iliotibial band or iliotibial tract and a little bit on the femur as well. Now, the main function of the gluteus maximus is going to be hip extension. Now, this hip extension is either through a semi-flexed position, a fully flexed position, or in a standing position, you take your leg and you extend it back. There we go, just like that. That's when the gluteus maximus fires up, it contracts, it shortens, it extends your leg back. It's also involved in a lot of other movements like standing, sitting, running, jumping, you name it. So it's a powerhouse, it's big for a reason, but there's also two other muscles. Now, almost think of the gluteal muscles as like an onion. There is different layers to it. The gluteus maximus is the top layer. Now, under the gluteus maximus is located a muscle called the gluteus medius. Now, this muscle is also originating on the ilium, but it's connecting to the greater trochanter on the femur there. So that's its insertion point. And this muscle is going to be there to help with abduction of your thigh. So pulling away from center line, boom, just like that. Now there's also a smaller muscle that's located under the gluteus medius, which is called the gluteus minimus. And this is located in a very similar area, the origin and insertion. It's also around the ilium. It's also on the greater trochanter as well, and its function is to help with abduction of the thigh, but they're there to also stabilize the hips too. So in a walking position, when you're placing yourself on one leg, those muscles are gonna fire up, help balance your hips out, so that way your gait is normal and your hips don't sag or drag. As you can tell, if you really want a sassy walk, make sure your gluteus medius and minimus is not fired up correctly. Those hips be swaying. Now that we got the anatomy, we got the function, and we have a little bit of understanding of what they really do, it's time to go over some of the exercises. And before we get to the rest of the video, I just want to shout out TLF. They got some amazing clothing. It's the clothing we're wearing during this video, and we highly recommend you check them out. Go to tlfapparel.com and use our code TLF-buff to get 15% off. The link is in the description, and just let them know the buffdudes sent you. Oh yeah. Now that we have the anatomy and the function out of the way, we want to go into some of the exercises that are really going to help activate the glutes. Now, this first one is not necessarily an exercise per se, it's more of a warm-up and one that you can use to really get connected to your glutes and make sure they're activating properly. It's going to be the glute bridge hold. As you can see, it's a very simple setup. You're just lying on the ground. Michaela has her feet firmly planted on the ground, and what she's going to be doing is extending her hips straight up, and as we know from the anatomy and the function, the gluteus maximus main or primary function is going to be hip extension. That's exactly what she's doing here. So immediately she's activating her glutes, but it's the glute bridge hold because she's holding that position for a set amount of time. Now, in an isometric contraction, it is shortening the muscles and it is going to maintain that contraction for a certain period of time. So that's really gonna help strengthen the muscles and really get you used to bracing and being connected with the muscles because they're really being forced to contract. Now, this is gonna be extremely important because a lot of people have a hard time really engaging their glutes in a lot of different movements. Let's say squats, for instance. the quads, hamstring can maybe take over, the glutes aren't really doing the job properly and helping out as much as they should for a hip hinging movement. So this in particular can be very essential and vital for starting your workouts out if you want to try to target and wake up your glutes. Simple exercise, but extremely effective. On to the exercises, and as you can tell, we're at the squat rack. Now, we're gonna be performing an exercise that's in the squat family, and I say that because it is gonna be working on hip hinge, much like the bilateral barbell squat, but we're gonna be switching things up a little bit. Instead of using 2 legs, we're gonna go into using 1 leg. So it's a unilateral exercise now. We're utilizing 1 leg, doing the same kind of positions as a normal squat, meaning that you're not only working in hip hinge, hip extension flexion, you're also utilizing your knee joint as well. So now it's a compound movement. And the reason this is so good is because as we learned through the anatomy, the function of the gluteal muscles, the gluteus maximus is definitely gonna be activating through that hip extension. But now, because it's a single leg, all of a sudden your gluteus medius and minimus are gonna really have to fire up to balance your hips. Now it's gonna look like this. You're gonna find something, as you can tell here, I'm finding a height that's just about allows my thigh to be parallel to the floor, or my shin or lower leg and upper leg to be at a 90-degree angle. Now you're getting this position and you're going to be squatting or extending up, going back down nice and slow, now squatting up. So everything's having to fire up to make sure those hips are balanced, but also now through hip flexion and extension, the gluteus maximus is firing. So you're really hitting all 3 of those muscles, and it's not only gonna strengthen it, it's also gonna help you work on balance and bracing and contracting those muscles properly so you can do this exercise correctly. If you wanna make it more difficult, what you do is get a lower box. So you decrease the height of the box. I mean, we're using a bench here, you can use a box, you can use a chair, really anything. But as you progress, you'll be able to do a lower amount. And if you're on a pro level, you'll be able to do a pistol squat or single leg squat without anything. There's really great that way, because when you introduce that progressive overload in the sense of adding more load to your muscles, that's when they're going to develop, that's when they're going to strengthen, that's when they're going to become better. You can also hold a weight for this exercise too, to increase the weight even more. There's also an alternative to do a single leg squat variation that's pretty well known, and one that is excellent too. And that exercise is going to be the Bulgarian split squats. And you're able to now focus on 1 leg at a time, utilizing that hip hinge and also the knee extension and flexion as well. So compound movement, but an exercise like this, it becomes a little bit more stable because you have your other leg to now balance you, that is placed behind you on a bench there. So you're still utilizing 1 leg, and you're still being able to really fire up those glutes, but all of a sudden now you have a little bit more balance and stability. So it does change things up, but it's still more of a single leg exercise and can be vital and important to help targeting your glutes. On to the next exercise, and this exercise is going to be hip thrusts. Now this is very similar to the glute bridge hold, and you'll see that in just a second. Its main focus is hip extension, so we're really trying to isolate specifically the gluteus maximus muscle. Now, as you can see, Michaela is using a bench to support her upper back, and the main point of contact is not only gonna be your upper back, but her feet as well. So feet nice and flat on the floor, and starting position down here, and all she's gonna be doing now is extending in her hips, bringing that top position, squeezing, and then immediately going back down. So this is not necessarily a hold, but now it's going through extension and flexion in a continuous motion there. So shortening and lengthening the muscle. What's different about the glute bridge hold and the hip thrust is going to be range of motion specifically. So as you can tell, she's allowed herself to go a lot further down, flexing your hips a lot more. The floor is not there to stop her, but she's also extending all the way to the top position and really getting that good squeeze in her glutes. So this is excellent to help target the gluteus maximus. And another great thing about this exercise, you can add a lot of weight to it. So you can put a dumbbell in your lap or a barbell in your lap, and you can do a lot of weight. But this exercise in particular is excellent for targeting the gluteus maximus. Yeah. So we just got done targeting the gluteus maximus, and now we're going to be using another exercise to help target the gluteus medius and minimus. As we talked about earlier in the anatomy and the function, the gluteus medius and minimus are primarily used for hip abduction, or abducting the thigh away from center line. And that is exactly what Michaela is doing right now. So as you can tell, it's a very simple exercise, but again, very effective, because since that movement is their main function, you're really going to be help targeting those muscles. And since it's only using one joint, the hip joint, now you're helping to isolate them. And this is going to be extremely effective and important if you really want to build those muscles up and strengthen them. As you can tell now, Michaela's just doing it with her leg. Now that, if you try it, is going to be a decent amount of weight. You'll be able to feel those muscles fire up, because unlike the gluteus maximus, those muscles aren't really going to be there for power and strength. Absolutely, they're there to help stabilize the hips, and as a muscle, they can strengthen, and that's exactly what you want, but don't think you have to do a ton of weight. Start with just your leg to really get connected with the muscle, and then only from there slowly introduce a little bit more resistance, and that can easily be done with a band, a cable, or maybe even holding a weight just on your thigh and doing the same movement there, although that one's not necessarily quite as effective as a band or cables, but you know what? You got to use sometimes what you have. So awesome movement, very simple, and definitely try this one out and you'll feel it burn real quick. There you go. We went over the anatomy, the function, and specific exercise are going to help pinpoint and develop your ass muscles. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. You know, this is a little bit more of an introductory course. We tried to simplify things as much as possible. And as you can tell, we implemented some exercises that are a little bit different to help activate those glutes and get you connected to them. Now, there's a lot of different exercises out there, so as long as you know the function, the anatomy, and how everything works, you can pick and choose what exercises work best for you. Of course, deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, walking lunges. I mean, there's a lot of those hip hinging movements, or abducting, or you know, hip extension kind of movements that you can introduce into your training. That's what makes it so fun, and that's why it's so important to understand where the muscles are and what they do. So now we got to talk about the one thing not a lot of other people like to talk about, or maybe are that familiar with, and that is if you're going to be training your glutes, specifically if you want to develop them, if you want to make them bigger and stronger, you're going to have to put some heavy ass weight on them. You're going to have to increase your resistance, put some load on those muscles. As we learned before, the gluteus maximus is a powerhouse. You need to make sure you're stimulating enough for it to grow and strengthen. That really goes along with any muscles, but you know, the glutes are huge. They're the biggest muscle in the body, so they're gonna need that. And you know, unfortunately, you'll maybe go over to any kind of social media account and you'll see some people that are advertising their glute program and they're using really light weights, and they might have a really nice ass, but either that's genetics or they didn't get it off lifting 5 pounds. You gotta put some weight on there. Not everyone's blessed with a nice ass, and I'm talking personally myself. So you gotta put some heavy weight on those squats or deadlifts and any of those movements that you can go really heavy with, and only then are you gonna start seeing the benefits and have those glutes grow. So make sure you remember that, and I guarantee you get some badass results. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. We always have a lot of fun making this, and as always, stay buff.